Hello everyone, welcome to Scorcher Toys at Anymoon.com's review of Bandai's DX VF-171 with armor parts Maruyama custom. I apologize if I said that name incorrectly, and I'll try to say it as infrequently as possible during this review. This toy was released in June 2015 for 21,060 yen. That's inclusive of tax, as this was a Tamashii exclusive toy that only shipped to Japanese residents. So if you're buying it secondhand, you'll probably have a middleman fee to pay. Inside the box, you got all the normal stuff that came with a regular VF-171 release. That includes instructions, fist covers for fighter mode, 6 fixed posed hands, 3 sets. You also got optional ABS replacement head guns / antennae. You got a gun, you have a pilot figure. This pilot figure is the same as the one that came with the Nightmare Plus toy. There's the display stand with the adapters for fighter, Gwalk, and Battroid modes. There was also, in the armor parts, you got the wings that include the hard points. You got the armor itself, obviously. That includes 2 long-range missiles, 2 sets of 3 medium-range missiles, and 2 other weapons that go at the end of the wing. Not sure what they are exactly, but they look cool enough. So this is the only toy that came bundled with armor parts. As you can see, the armor parts do make the VF-171 look pretty aggressive in fighter mode. Now I will say, installing the armor parts in fighter mode is pretty difficult. You do have to bring the legs down and pop the arms up, so it's basically like you're transforming the Gwalk mode and then putting it back into fighter mode again. Now I've got the little wheels out here. You can see they're very small. They do go conceal into the leg armors because these leg armors are covering the more traditional landing gear. To put them away, you need to rotate them and then fold them back and then close up these doors. Now when they're extended, and they do have rubber wheels that roll on their own and they do lock in the forward position, when they're extended you get just enough clearance for the gun. So it's not really remarkable in that way, but it is cool that they did integrate landing gear into the armor itself. The front landing gear can actually open and close with the gun installed. There's that articulated tow bar there, so that's cool too. There we go. The armor itself does a great job staying on, even these front hip ones. When you first install them, you have to kind of swing the legs down and put them in Gwalk mode, and they're a lot less secure then, but when you actually lock the legs into position, it also locks the armor into position. So all of the armor in fighter mode stays on extremely well. And as you can see, the VF-171 itself, very well locked together in this mode. The gun is on a ball joint, so you can point it in any which way, and it looks good. So this gun, the bottom gun, has 2 ways of installing. It has a little flip out mechanism in the back that will lock just like it does without the armor on the back there. And it also has this peg in the front. And really what I always do is just cheat and use the peg in the front and not the one in the back. But as you can see, the risk you play when you do that is that you'll knock the gun off unintentionally. It's really locked in there if you use that back piece too, but I like ease of use instead. Alright, let's check out the display stand. The display stand that comes with this toy is the same as all of the other VF-171 display stands, which means you get a base, an arm, and then whatever adapter you choose to use. This is actually 2 parts that make the fighter adapter. It's all static. There's nothing you could do once you get the toy on the display stand. Now, when putting the toy on the display stand, I really can't do it with the gun installed. It never seems to work. So I would say take your gun off. You want to get the front of the display stand into these little holes right on the side here, and that will make it really grab on. Easier to do without a camera. There you go. And then you could slide the gun on if you want, once you've actually got it installed. The back will plug into holes in the legs. Now this is one of my qualms with the VF-171 toys, is the nose doesn't really lock into place very well. You can see my landing gears are kind of drooping down too, so we'll tighten that up. So there you go. Here it is on the display stand. Solid, but not remarkable. The armored parts come with weapons for the wings. I was really hoping, since this was a bundle set, Bandai would get away from the whole notion of having 2 sets of wings, but that was not the case. So you can see the weapons really latch on to those hard points, so that's very good to see. We pop off this leg armor as well. We can see both the original landing gear door, and I'll show you that in a moment here, as well as this peg. This is a plastic nail, essentially, that is being squeezed into the wing and then the back behind it. So to remove the original wing that came on the toy, which is this wing right here, you have to kind of pull the legs out, apply pressure to the wing to try to pop out this peg, and then get your fingernail in there and pry it out. It's a huge pain in the butt. It is a terrible design. On the Alto toy, it pops off constantly when you don't want it to. On the Nightmare Plus toy, one of the heads of the pegs just sheared right off. I hate this design, and I find it as huge detriment to the toy, but the good news with this version, you could just put the hardpoint wings on and forget it and never bother with the whole mechanism ever again, provided they don't get loose and start popping out on you. There have been 2 previous Tamashii exclusive armored part sets sold for the 171. The major difference between them is the wings that are included. You get the wings specific to the craft that you're buying. So the Nightmare Plus toy came with the blue wings with hard points. Alto's version came with Alto's wings with hard points. That's the biggest difference. The armor itself, exactly the same. The next biggest difference is the ordnance. The Nightmare Plus toy came with multi-dimension bombs and reaction bombs, and Alto's toy came with the 3-missile layout that we see again on this toy. So this toy comes with armor parts that are essentially the same as Alto's armored parts, with the exception that the wings are obviously specific for this release. This is Fighter Mode Sans the armor parts. And when you first got the toy, it would have the no hardpoint wings installed. I've got my hardpoint ones on, and I'm not going back. I've got the gun now using that back tooth as well, and it's so strong it can actually hold the toy up by the gun, so that's pretty impressive. Here are the normal landing gears, rubber wheels that spin, they lock in the forward position, so those are obviously visually a little bit better than the armored ones, and just as functional, if not more so. Then we have an opening canopy, which just slides up and then opens, and then there's obviously the removable pilot figure. The cockpit detail isn't the best, but what are you going to do? You have the little guns next to the cockpit that pivot. That's cool. Turning our attention to the back of the toy, there are little hand covers that you can use. So here's a hand installed, here's a cover installed. The covers just pop right in on top. Now they do work better if you don't already have a fist in there, but I personally would recommend you never take the fists off because it does help with transformation to have fists in there. So fighter mode, very solid overall. Now this version obviously does have an Natasha on the back. Looks pretty good. It's well applied. I don't see any issues with how it's on there, so whether or not it's your kind of art, up to you, but it looks like it's well done at least. This is Gwalk mode, and I do have a separate transformation video I encourage you to check out, and I also have separate armored parts review where I show you how to install the armored parts, and I also encourage you to check that out. Couldn't really include all that in this review because it would be the never-ending review. Alright, so, Gwalk mode. Holds together very securely just like fighter mode did. I'm a big fan of that. You'll notice there's a good amount of metal when you transform the toy. The arms, entirely metal here. The hip joints here are metal. There's a lot of metal in the feet and in the ankles. So nothing really superficially metal, but there's a lot of metal. Also like these arms right here to the back. So there's a lot of metal where you need it. So that's always good to see. The ankles in Gwalk mode will blow you away. They really allow you to get quite a lot of dynamic poses, which makes Gwalk mode a lot of fun. And it actually holds its weight up pretty well. So again, the nose cone's the only thing that really is going to bother you. The hand transformation is a little funky. It does have a lock right here. And that's what allows the arm to slide, or the hand to slide free. So once you have it all the way out, you lock it into place. When you go to transform back, you have to open this up and then slide it back in. It's a little funky by its nature. I'm not a huge fan of that. The articulated hand's do an alright job holding the gun. They have a little slot. There's a peg that they go into. That's good. There is this front piece that slides out. Not really sure what purpose it serves, but that's your gun gimmick for you. So overall, Gwalk mode without the armor parts on is a lot of fun. Let's see how it looks with the armored parts on. Obviously, the armor parts add some heft to Gwalk mode. Let's go ahead, before we get started, and take a look at the fixed posed hand. So here's the fixed posed gun hand that comes with the toy. You can go ahead and just thread that onto the gun, and that'll give you a much more secure grip than the articulated hand that's on there. The articulated hand doesn't do a terrible job, but it can get frustrating at times. So we're just going to go ahead and pull away, and then you're going to make sure that lock is in, and we can go ahead and just press down. Let's see, there it goes, to get the new hand on there. Now what you see is this weird double gun effect that happens with the armored parts. So if that bothers you, obviously you just ditch the one gun. The armor themselves stay on very well in this mode. The hip armors, you do have to watch out for. If you find they're popping off constantly, that means you need to recess the legs back a joint. If you pull them all the way forward, it's very hard to get these hip armors to really stay in position. That can be tricky though, because you have those black triangles that you've pushed in as part of the transformation mechanism. So you want to make sure you don't pinch those too much either. So a little bit complicated in that regard. You do have your display stand. The toy attaches just like it did in fighter mode with the front teeth and then supported by the back. Again, static, holds the toy up well enough. I can settle that in a little bit better, but overall, just plain, not much to say about that. Battroid mode is my least favorite mode because there are so many little things that can and will go wrong. You can accidentally push in this little black thing here. You can accidentally push in this, and you will. You can accidentally push in this part here. And anytime you do those things, you're going to have to fish them back out. Also, in doing dynamic posing, you can have things pop apart on you. Whereas Gwalk and fighter mode, everything locks together super well. In Battroid mode, it can come together pretty well, but when you handle it, it's going to get jostled. Things will start popping off or popping back to where they were previously, and it just gets frustrating very quickly. So not so much the case when toys are brand new, but certainly as they loosen up over time, it gets more and more frustrating. Now, we can look at the back now. You can see that Natasha in its full glory, so that's pretty nice. Let's go through. Now, the good thing about Battroid mode is that it is incredibly dynamic. The head is on a ball joint. The area below it's a little wobbly, which I'm not entirely a fan of, but it gives a little more articulation to it. The shoulders, great. Spin forward, spin back, pivot up and down. You can bring the arms out at the shoulders. Everything very stiff. There we go. Then there's a pivot right below and a twist point. Again, very stiff in that shoulder area. Then you have the double jointed elbow. And you have the, again, the hands swivel. So that's good. And there's a pivot at the wrist. Going down, you have your your hip joint, which can come way forward. There is no waist joint. You can go way back. Then you have the Gwalk joint. And then moving down, you have a knee, obviously. And you can pull that knee out further to get even greater range of motion. Here, the backpack just kind of popped open there. And there's also a twist point, which very much worries me because that's where my Nightmare Plus toy broke. Then there's the ankles, which you can extend and then really have fun with, like I showed you in Gwalk mode. So all in all, especially with those ankles and the hip range of motion that you can get, see, it's coming out here. You can have a lot of fun posing this toy and some pretty interesting poses. So fun there, just a little bit too fiddly for my liking. With the armor on in Battroid mode, I'd go ahead and ditch that other gun. You don't really need it. Obviously, you have a bunch of armor and the thing looks very sturdy and impressive. When handling the toy, you just want to watch out for these thigh armors. They pop off a little easily, especially if you start getting really dynamic poses and using that Gwalk joint. The one bummer here is that these chest areas do not pop open to show missiles. I think that happened in Frontier. Can't swear to it. Seems like that's what's supposed to happen, so it's a bummer that it doesn't. You can correct me via comment if that's not supposed to happen. Well, I'm not a fan of the display stand really in any mode. I'm even less a fan of it in Battroid mode. Getting the adapter in is a pain in the butt, and it's the same pain in the butt getting it off. The tolerances are very tight. If I move the legs, I can pop that adapter off. I'm just not happy with it. And then ultimately, you just put it on the display stand, and it's a little bit taller, but the toy doesn't have any problem standing up on its own, so I would generally recommend not even paying attention to the display stand when you have the toy in Battroid mode. This was Bandai's fourth try at the VF-171. Their first was Alto, shown here with the Tamashii armor parts on. This toy was frustrating in that the pegs constantly fell out of the wings, so they kind of addressed that as they moved forward. It was also really stiff in odd places and loose in others. Made transformation just an absolute bear. I can never get these legs to really lock into place like they're supposed to. Again, it functions fine like that, although it's just a little sloppy and definitely seemed like it was better CAD than it was a toy. Then we have the Nightmare Plus toy, and that is just a disaster upon disasters. First of all, it's my favorite looking one, so that depresses the heck out of me, but it breaks. It breaks bad, and it worries me that some of the other toys might follow suit. So I obviously had a leg came off. On all of the 171 toys, you got to be careful you don't lose one of these chest things, and that's even more so because sometimes they pop off during transformation, which is what I suspect happened to that guy there, back to fighter mode. So you can lose those pretty easily, and then it's gone forever. Also, on this toy, the little black triangles that were in fighter mode that slip underneath the armpits, oftentimes cracked and crumbling before you even open the toy. So the Nightmare Plus toy, which was cool because it had some tweaks, just seemed to be built very, very poorly and broke on many, many owners. Then we got the Luca VF-171, which is a pretty cool toy, all said and done. It's got the radar array and comes together in kind of unique ways, but it's kind of a parts former, so definitely not for everybody, and it never had an armor release, at least not to date. And finally, we have this release, which my legs actually peg into place. First one that really works very well in that regard. So far, everything's just the right amount of tightness, just the right amount of looseness, if you will. Everything fits very, very well. So I really like it, but I'm hesitant because we have such a poor track record from the first two releases to really recommend it. These days, we're getting Delta toys that are a step up. I would say there's a few things here that a renewal toy could possibly do better someday. So maybe with Macross Delta having VF-171s in it, we'll see a slightly tweaked mold at some point. One can hope. In the meantime, as far as VF-171 toys go, this is a great one to get, and I recommend it for fans of the VF-171 and Macross Frontier. If you're just looking for the best toy out there, this one's a little complicated. It seems to be an acquired taste, so you might want to shop around. The DX171 does play well with 160 scale toys. It's 27 centimeters long in fighter mode, and at least 25 centimeters tall in Battroid mode. You can make it even taller by extending the ankles or extending the legs. I would say it probably should be about 25.5 centimeters tall. Alright, thanks for viewing. Check out anymoon.com for my full article.